Track 28.
Morning, everyone. How are you?
Fine, thanks, Joe.
Yeah, fine, Joe. Have you managed to do much research on our minority languages project?
Well, Julia, I've been having some trouble finding information about the number of Cornish speakers in the UK. The records at the Office of National Statistics and the Cornish Language Council say different things, so I'm not sure who to believe.
Susan, have you got any information about this?
I was looking on the government's minority languages website, and it says that nearly half the minority language speakers in the UK are speakers of Welsh.
Are you sure it's nearly half? I thought the number of Gaelic and Welsh speakers was more or less the same.
It used to be when Gaelic was a compulsory subject in schools, but nowadays there are fewer speakers of Gaelic compared to Welsh. And apparently, with Cornish, it's difficult to know the exact percentage of the population who speak it, because most people only speak it to intermediate level. Very few people are fluent speakers.
I suppose that's why the statistics are different. Well, I think we should go with the more conservative estimate based on the number of fluent speakers.
I think you're right, which means that Cornish isn't spoken by nearly as many people as the other languages.
Yes, I think that's right too. Based on fluent speakers, that means that Welsh is the most widely spoken, and the numbers of Irish and Gaelic speakers are more or less the same.
Track 29.
Right, Harry, Rob, shall we get started on this presentation for European studies?
Well, how about if I start by talking about the central regions of Spain where most people speak Spanish?
Good idea. It's important we make it clear that the majority of the population use Spanish as their main language. Then I can introduce the Galician accent of the Northwest.
But isn't Galician more of a dialect?
Oh, yes, you're right.
We've got to get our terminology correct, because Spain is complicated in terms of languages and dialects and accents. How about we then move across to the northeast, and I give details on the Basque language and how it's different from Spanish?
That seems logical, Stephanie. Do you also want to mention the other language in the northeast? It's Catalan, isn't it?
Yes. In fact, we should say it's the official language of the region to show how important it is.
So, what am I going to present?
We need to include something about accents and speaking styles, don't we?
Of course. I could explain the difficulties of understanding the accent in the south due to the fact that the locals speak quickly.
Excellent. Well, I think that covers everything. Shall we meet tomorrow to practice our presentation?
Track 30. So, Natalie, Louise, how are you doing with your report on encouraging people to speak local languages?
Fine, thanks, Dr. Phillips. It's been really interesting.
We've found lots of information which we've collated for our report.
Good. What are you going to focus on?
Well, many schools and colleges are doing good work promoting local languages, both as qualifications and in terms of after-school clubs.
And then there's the rise in popularity of minority language music, which seems to be driven by tourism. Tourists who are exposed to songs in indigenous languages become interested in learning those languages.
OK, now you need to be careful with these topics. They are fascinating, but you need to look at the influences which drive language learning. Education doesn't leave people much choice, and music isn't a strong enough factor.
Do you have any suggestions for us?
Well, what did we talk about in last week's seminar? Can you remember any of the real push factors?
Do you mean things like communication and relationships between companies and their workers?
It's much more powerful than music, don't you think?
Yes, I see what you mean. So I suppose our other idea isn't very strong either. We also thought about hobby groups, but I'm beginning to think they're less significant.
Yes, there aren't sufficient hobbyist groups to make a real difference to local language learning. But think about something else which is similar but reaches a much larger proportion of the population of a country or community.
Like online discussion groups. I remember in the lecture you talked about how the internet is fueling the increase in local languages through the World Languages Project.
This is more appropriate for your report because we can actually measure the amount of correspondence in each language and chart increases and decreases over time, which makes it a more rigorous form of analysis.
Of course. so we should definitely include that in our report.
It's becoming clearer now. We need to write about the larger factors involving commerce and online communication where we can record language usage.
I think it's better than looking at anecdotal information.
Thanks, Dr. Phillips.
Track 31. Section 3. You will hear 3 students discussing a language project. First, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 1 to 6. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
So, we need to get this field trip sorted out as soon as possible, don't we?
Yes, let's get started. James, have you worked out which 2 countries we should travel to?
Well, I thought we could go to the USA and Mexico because that's where the populations of most native languages are concentrated. But then I found out that the 3 languages we're most interested in are more widely spoken in Canada than Mexico, so I think we should go there instead.
OK. Anna, weren't you going to think about our research focus?
Yes, and I think I've found 2 areas that would work well. Firstly, use of the 3 languages, Nardini, Salishan and Algic among the younger generation, people up to the age of 25. I found out that although there are many older speakers of Algic, it's used much less by the young. In fact, young people under the age of 25 use both Nardini and Salishan more than Algic.
That's interesting. That means that native language use isn't really being affected by the older generations anymore.
So what's the other focus area then, Anna?
Well, it would be good to try to find out what affects changes in native language speaker populations.
You mean things like family life and the influence of popular culture or tourism?
Yes, areas like that, but not tourism or culture because they're too general. I think we should look at whether family has an impact in terms of passing on native language use, and possibly the effects of government language policy too.
Government figures can be deceptive, but they're still worth looking at. Maybe we should also focus on something like job creation and work statistics and the number of people who leave the USA to live in another country instead.
Yes. I think emigration would be as useful as language policy.
OK then, let's focus on those 3 as well as what happens in families.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have 20 seconds to look at questions 7 to 10. Track 32. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Well, shall we look at our route now? Most of the speakers we're looking for are in California, so we could start there. We can spend 2 weeks travelling around and meeting people to get some background information and then start collecting data.
What do you think about beginning in the southwest corner of the state and visiting the Barona Reservation?
That's a good idea. We'll be able to get some interviews with native language speakers there. And then we could go to the Eastern Mountains to visit the local education authority of North County. They've got a native language project for school children.
Why there? Wouldn't it be better to go to the education department in San Diego? It's bigger.
But they focus more on Spanish and English bilingualism and less on native languages.
In that case, the North County Education Authority will be more valuable, so let's do that. After that, we could head southeast to the town of Bishop. There's a company there called Cotec, which employs only bilingual speakers. I've emailed the managing director, who's happy to give us an interview.
Oh, that's great work, James. It sounds like something we should definitely do.
Right. Well, I'll email her to confirm.
Also, we should go to Sun City. It's this bilingual town in the south-central area of the region. They have a policy whereby all signs in the town must be in the local language as well as English. We can take photos of these signs. They'll make good visuals for our report.
But won't that be intrusive for the people who live there?
No, they're used to it. The village is used as a model for other communities who'd like to do the same thing.
In that case, let's add it to the itinerary.
Track 33. Practice exam. You will hear a number of different recordings and will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the questions and instructions, and you will have a chance to check your answers. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a customer asking for help in a shop. First, you will have some time to look at questions 1 to 7. You will see that there is an example which has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation related to this will be played first.
Excuse me, where are the dresses?
They're at the end of this aisle, on the left. Can I help you with anything? The assistant says the dresses are on the left, so left is written as the answer. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 7.
Excuse me, where are the dresses?
They're at the end of this aisle, on the left. Can I help you with anything?
Yes, maybe. I'm not from around here, so I don't know this store.
Well, I can help you with anything you need.
Fantastic. I'm actually down here for my brother's wedding, and I need something to wear. I've just started a new job, and I haven't had time to get anything yet. I'm looking for something smart. Maybe a new dress.
Well, what about this one?
I think it's too hot for long sleeves.
Yes. Well, this one has shorter sleeves, and it still has the bow, which I think is a nice detail. Or there's this patterned one.
I'm not keen on a pattern. I think I'll go for the one with the bow. Do you have it in a size 10?
Let me have a look. Yes, here.
Great. I need a hat, and then I can try them on together.
What kind of hat are you looking for?
What about this one with the flower?
Yes, but if I may suggest, a taller hat would add to your height.
Really?
Yes, try this one.
Oh, I see what you mean.
We have this style with the single flower or with a small bunch, and it comes with a wide or narrow brim.
I like the narrow brim and just the one flower. Can I have a blue flower?
I'm afraid it just comes in cream.
Well, it goes with the dress anyway.
Great. I'll place an order and have the hat sent to you. It'll take about 2 days to be delivered. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
I need to take down a few details for delivery. Can I take your name?
Ellen Barker.
And the delivery address?
It'll be my brother's address. It's 14 Brightwell Avenue.
14... can you spell that, please?
Yes, BRIGHTWELL Avenue, Staybridge, Kent, DA4 7DF.
And can I take a contact number?
Yes, my mobile is 03221 777
03221 775.
No, it's a 4 at the end.
Oh, sorry, I've got it now. We can deliver on May the 12th. We can't specify an exact time, just morning or afternoon.
Any time in the early morning is fine.
And how would you like to pay?
Visa.
Great. That comes to £32.25.
OK, thanks.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10. Track 34. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
I'm just going to try this dress on and then look for shoes. Where are the changing rooms?
They're to the left of the store, right next to customer services.
And I want some shoes and accessories too. Where can I find them?
The accessories are in the women's wear department. The shoe department is right at the front of the store, between menswear and home furnishings. Oh, no, sorry. We've just moved the shoe department for the summer season. It's now very near the changing rooms, actually, straight in front of them.
Thanks so much for your help. And where can I pay for the other things?
The cash desk is at the front of the store, by the menswear.
Thanks.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Track 35. Section 2. You will hear a talk by a tour guide. First, you will have some time to look at questions 11 to 17. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 17. Welcome to San Fernando City Tours. I'm Mark, your tour guide. We have a lot to see in 3 hours, so make sure you're comfortable. We'll be traveling into the historical district first, and then into the town center. After that, it's out to the harbor, and we'll finish up at the lighthouse, just past the harbor. That will take us up to midday, and after that, you're free to do what you want. At the lighthouse, you'll have a chance to visit the tea room and take photographs of the magnificent coastline. Now, as we have only 3 hours, we won't be able to take you around the shopping district, but we think you'd prefer to look around the shops there in your own time anyway. San Fernando has some well-known tourist attractions, the lighthouse, for example, and the National Library. However, the little-known military museum is not to be missed. Be sure to visit before you leave. Now, there's a lot to do in San Fernando. Indeed, there really is something for everyone. For those who love the water, I can recommend a trip on the Seafarer, one of the most famous boats on the San Fernando River. It does an evening trip with a 3-course meal included. It's great fun for everyone, but especially for young people in their teens or 20s. After 9, there's a disco on the boat, and it gets really lively. Then there's a climbing wall near the town center. It's incredibly popular, with a large wall for expert climbers and a smaller wall for novices. There's a junior wall and a creche, so it's a great day out for those of you with kids. And if you like walking, there's some great walking tours. The City Sights tour is highly recommended, as is the walking tour by the coast. But that one's only for the fit, not really suitable for children or the elderly. For more mature people, or those less able to get around, I would suggest a tour around the vineyards. It can be done in the luxury of a coach, and it's a wonderful way to explore the region's wines. Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Track 36. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20. Naturally, there's a charge for all these attractions, but you can get 15% off if you have an Explorer Pass. If you don't have a pass but would like one, the driver here has application forms. Just ask him for one and fill it out while on the tour. Then you hand it into the tour office. Normally, it costs $10, but this year it's just $7. When you hand it in, you'll get your picture taken for the card on the spot, and then your card is ready to use. Remember to show it whenever you pay for anything. The discounts apply not just to tourist attractions, but some bars and restaurants. Basically, everywhere you see a red Explorer symbol. We're coming up to the historical district now. If you'd like to look at That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Track 37. Section 3. You will hear 2 students and their tutor discussing a wildlife presentation. First, you will have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Ian. Come on in.
Hi, Professor Gordon. We wanted to talk to you about our wildlife presentation next week.
Have you decided how to organise it?
Yes, Professor. At first, we were going to focus on the cat family, but then we decided to talk about nocturnal animals instead.
Yes, good idea. And how is your planning going?
It's going well. We think we have enough material for 20 minutes. The advantage is that there are so many visual aids we can use. We found lots on the internet which we think will be really interesting for people.
The problem is that this topic has been hard to narrow down. If anything, we've got too much information for just 20 minutes. How do you think we could narrow it down further?
It is a broad subject. There are a few ways you could do it, but I'd recommend just looking at a representative sample of nocturnal animals, just 4 or 5.
Yes, and maybe we could choose one animal from each continent, or a land creature, a marine creature, and a winged animal.
I like the idea of separating it by different types of animals. And if we limit the detail, we'll definitely have enough time.
But don't limit the detail too much. Also, think how you're going to interest the audience.
Well, we're going to have a picture for each animal so we can talk through the picture.
That's a nice idea, but don't limit yourself to pictures. If you can find any clips of the animals, use them. Showing brief video clips can keep an audience interested.
I'll look on the internet tonight.
And think of questions to ask your audience. People like to be involved.
Yes, that's a great idea. Anyway, Professor, we've been practicing our presentation and we'd like to show you a small section. Is that okay?
Well, we just have a couple of minutes left, but go ahead.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Track 38. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Well, we were thinking of presenting each animal with a picture and describing their physical characteristics.
Okay, but not in too much detail. That's just background information.
We'll start with the jaguar. I'll introduce it by saying that the jaguar is a nocturnal animal and the only species of the genus Panthera to be found in the Americas. Like any cat, it has whiskers and it can move quickly. Its spine has great movement, meaning a jaguar can take long strides, sometimes up to 5.5 meters. This can make it a deadly predator, as you can imagine. Moving on to the fur, its fur is quite distinct. The markings are like black donut-shaped spots on its otherwise yellow fur. People often confuse them with a leopard for this reason. Now, the tail is interesting. Although people think that the tail has stripes on it, the fur on the tail actually is similar to the body, with black circles around the lower section. The jaguar is generally a creature to be feared. Oh yes, I should have mentioned this earlier. Sorry, like most cats, it has sharp, retractable claws.
Yes, that's fine, but be careful. The jaguar is usually thought of as nocturnal, but strictly speaking, it's crepuscular. In other words, most active between dusk and dawn. But as long as you mention this, you can put it under the umbrella of nocturnal. Is that all?
Yes, I think so. Thanks, Professor.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Track 39. Section 4. You will hear a lecture on time. First, you will have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40. The subject of this series of lectures is horology, the science of measuring time, and we'll be looking at a few basic concepts in this lecture. The measurement of time has come a long way since ancient times. It began with such devices as the sundial, where the position of the sun's shadow marked the hour. Daylight was divided into 12 temporary hours. These temporary hours were longer in the summer and shorter in the winter, simply because the amount of daylight changes with the seasons. The earliest sundial we know comes from Egypt. It was made of stone and is thought to date from 1500 BC. Sundials were used throughout the classical world and, with time, evolved into more elaborate devices that could take into account seasonal changes and geographical positioning and reflect the hours accurately, no matter what the time of year. This was quite an achievement in technology. Today, sundials can be seen as decorative pieces in many gardens. In the 11th century, the Chinese invented the first mechanical clocks. They were large and expensive, and certainly not intended for individuals. However, this is the type of clock we are familiar with today. There have been many developments in clocks and watches since then, and they have been greatly improved. But if your clock or watch makes a ticking sound, then it could well be based on the mechanical movements the Chinese developed 1,000 years ago. However, timekeeping has moved on from the mechanical clock. Time has become so important that there is a series of atomic clocks around the world which measure international atomic time. Even though many countries have their own calendars, globalization has made it essential that we measure time uniformly. That we know, for example, that when it's 6 a.m. in the United Kingdom, it's 2 p.m. in Beijing. This standard was set in 1958. Now these atomic clocks are situated in over 70 laboratories all over the world. There is so much to cover about the development of time measurement that I would like to refer you to the reading list. The core text is The Development of Time, Theory and Practice, but there are many other useful texts. A good grounding in the subject is given in Understanding Time by J.R. Beale. Although some sections lack detailed analyses, it does offer a good foundation. Also, Time, Concepts and Conventions is quite a useful read. You might think from the title that it's about the philosophy of time, but this isn't the case. Rather, it gives a good description of how different countries have different approaches to time in terms of calendars and days. Lastly, The Story of Time by David Harris analyses time in great detail, and I would recommend this book if you are aiming to specialise in horology. Now, we're going to continue with an in-depth look at lunar and solar cycles. That is the end of the listening test. You now have half a minute to check your answers.